The lecture hall on Virex 9. The Grand Hall of Xenological Sciences on Virex 9 was rarely full. Even during keynote events, half the rows remained vacant, and the levitating scholar pods drifted lazily through the thin blue air. But today, the amphitheater swelled with noise and light, filled to capacity with beings from across the galactic quadrant. A subtle hum of tension vibrated through the crowd, a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and something that bordered on discomfort. On the central dais, lit from above by cold-spectrum solar lamps, floated Professor Zilvar of Androlax, limbs coiled and contemplative, a dozen golden eyes scanning the packed chamber. Zilvar had lectured on over 67 worlds, spoken before emperors and algorithms alike, but never had a title caused such a stir. Projected above him in every known trade tongue were the words, "Why humans are the supreme predators of the universe." A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembly. Predators? Humans? A gelatinous scholar from the Threx cluster blurted, "Surely this is satire." A pair of crystalline delegates chimed sympathetically in frequency-based laughter. In a dark corner of the amphitheater, a lone human sat, arms crossed. Her uniform bore no insignia. She didn't speak. She just watched. Professor Zilvar slowly uncoiled a few of his feeding tendrils, a sign of intellectual preparation in his culture. The hall fell silent. "When we speak of predators," he began, his voice translated instantly into every ear via neural resonance, "we often envision claws, fangs, mass and muscle, speed, surprise. Evolution's champions of ambush and blood." Several species nodded, or shimmered, or clicked in agreement. Yet, Zilvar continued, gesturing with a limb toward the projection dome. "You will find none of those traits in Homo sapiens, at least not overtly." A hollow projection lit up, the image of an unarmed human standing on a savanna, sun-scorched and lean, facing a large beast. They're not fast, nor strong, nor armored. Their senses are merely average. And yet, the beast in the projection fell, pierced not by claw or fang, but by a shaped wooden spear. They endure. They adapt. They persist. He paused, letting the image dissolve into a timeline. Millennia of human history sweeping forward in seconds. Tribes, villages, cities, skyscrapers, rockets. Humans are the only known species to have become global apex predators before mastering agriculture. Long before advanced tools, they hunted with patience and cooperation. They did not evolve to kill quickly, but to kill inevitably. A collective unease began to settle in the room. They sweat through their skin, allowing them to run for hours without overheating. They possess binocular vision, rare among prey species. They hunt in packs, coordinate silently, and, most crucially, they teach. They pass knowledge from one generation to the next with terrifying efficiency. A voice called out from the third tier, a bright-scaled Farsinan philosopher. But their lifespans are so short. How can they be dangerous across galactic timeframes? Zilvar turned his eyes toward the philosopher. A brief fire can burn brighter than a star. Human generations turn over rapidly, yes, but with each turnover, they iterate. They improve. They grow more cunning, more resilient. Another hollow projection appeared, a sequence of technological leaps, stone tools to steel, combustion to nuclear, analog to quantum. Civilizations leaped forward not by divine inspiration, but by sheer, tireless trial and error. "They fail," said Zilvar. "And then they learn from failure." That is the predator's mind, not just to survive, but to dominate, to anticipate, to calculate. A low murmur of dissent rippled through the audience. A four-armed diplomat from the Zoquari Dominion raised a limb. But they're also emotional, prone to sentiment. They weep over lost creatures. They sing to the stars. How does that align with your theory? Zilvar's tendrils curled in contemplation. A predator that can weep for its prey is more terrifying than one that cannot. Compassion is not weakness. It is merely another tool, one that allows them to unify to infiltrate, to justify. The hall was silent now. No laughter, no mockery, just hundreds of eyes, lenses, and receptors fixed on the professor. They're not monsters, Zilvar concluded, voice quiet now. They're not gods, but they're the only species I have studied that knows it is capable of monstrosity and still chooses to wield it. He let the words settle, the silence thick and unmoving. Then, with a casual flick of a limb, he brought up one final image, a human child laughing in a field of grass, holding a stick like a sword. A cub, he said, playing at war. And in the shadows, the human woman smiled. Anatomy of a predator. The light dimmed slightly as Professor Zilvar signaled for the next sequence. A ripple of tension floated through the lecture hall. What had begun as an academic curiosity now carried the unmistakable scent of warning. We will now examine, the professor said slowly, the anatomical and behavioral foundations of the human predator. The projection above shimmered into an anatomical model of the human body, muscles, bones, organs, and neural networks rotating in gentle silence. You see fragility, Zilvar said, voice smooth and neutral. I see specialization. He highlighted the leg muscles. Humans are bipedal. This limits speed, yes, but grants endurance. They are the only known species capable of persistence hunting, running prey, to collapse over hours. A murmur stirred the audience. An avian species emitted a skeptical click. What does exhaustion kill? What of defense? They do not need speed if their prey cannot outrun time, Zilvar responded. A herd flees the lion, but humans? They walk after you, and they don't stop. He zoomed in on the hands. Then, there's the matter of the human grip. An opposable thumb, not uncommon, but paired with high tactile sensitivity and tool memory. A human does not simply hold a spear. They train until the spear becomes an extension of thought. Images flickered. Early flint blades, bows, traps, slingshots. Then came firearms, railguns, drones. A progression of weaponry spanning thousands of years in a few seconds. They are born with no fangs, no claws, and yet they became the deadliest tool makers in the galaxy. An aquatic creature gurgled in doubt. Tools are not predation. Tools are survival. Professor Zilvar's gaze sharpened. Survival becomes domination when tools evolve faster than biology. Humans did not wait for evolution to grant them power. They took it. Next, he brought up a neural scan. This, he said, is a human brain. Compared to most sentient species, it is inefficient. Emotion bleeds into reason. Memory is imperfect. Logic is flawed. A pause. And yet, humans are adaptive beyond calculation. They possess neuroplasticity, a brain that rewires itself in response to trauma, learning, environment. They grow from pain. They remember suffering, and they do not repeat it blindly. A cold hush spread. A species known for its long cultural memory, the mrak, folded its limbs tighter. Where others fall into ritual, the professor said, humans experiment. They change tactics. They abandon the past without regret. He paced slowly across the dais, limbs curling with careful tension. Let us also consider their social hunting structures. Images appeared, wolves flanking a deer, humans driving mammoths toward cliffs. Most apex predators hunt in pairs or packs. Humans? They coordinate in units that span continents and centuries. They embed knowledge into language, encode it into symbols, preserve it in machines. A hologram of human soldiers flashed across the hall. Formations operating with precision, synced by nothing more than hand gestures and trust. They have mastered synchronized aggression across generations. He turned back to the audience. And they do not just train themselves. They train other predators. The projection changed again. Wolves alongside humans, then dogs pulling sleds, guiding the blind, attacking on command. They tamed the wolf, not through brute force, through bonding. They turned a rival predator into an ally. They do the same with horses, falcons, even machines. An image of a robotic quadruped flashed, silent, relentless, emotionless. still unmistakably human-made. This is not just survival. This is strategic evolution, planned, taught, executed. A being from the Valari combine raised a shimmering appendage. But their aggression is not constant. They create art. They meditate. They heal. Yes, Zilvar nodded. That is the paradox. Humans are not always predators. They are selective. They choose when to become dangerous. That makes them infinitely more unpredictable. The holoscreen faded into black. In war, most species escalate until resources are gone. But humans? They escalate until one side is utterly broken. Then they rebuild. Not just the cities, the methods. A long, slow breath filled the room. They learn from every kill. They question, improve, refine. That is what makes them supreme. A few of the attending scholars now sat more rigidly. The energy in the room had shifted again, not toward awe, nor disgust, but the quiet calculation of beings recognizing a threat. Zilvar looked toward the back of the hall. The human woman still watched silently. Her eyes met his. She did not nod. She did not smile. She simply waited. The darkness within. The lights dimmed again, deeper this time, almost uncomfortably so. The amphitheater seemed to shrink, the vastness of the hall giving way to a quiet, shared unease. Professor Zilvar remained still at the center, his many limbs folded in an almost reverent pose. This next portion, he said solemnly, will not be easy. The holoscreen flickered back to life, not with anatomy or behavior, but with images from human history. The scenes were curated, not for shock value, but for revelation. We have examined the human body, their endurance, their ingenuity, but none of those alone make them the universe's most supreme predators. He gestured, and the images began to scroll. What makes them supreme, Zilvar said, is what they are willing to do. A battlefield faded into view. Smoke, fire, and torn landscapes. Not alien, not ancient. Earth, trenches and barbed wire. Gas and silence. Their wars do not end in stalemates. They escalate. Another scene, cities flattened by firestorms. The charred remains of once glittering civilizations. Children crying beside rubble. They do not merely seek victory. Humans often define peace as the complete removal of resistance. A tremor rippled through the crowd. A serpentine being whispered, genocide? Zilvar nodded slowly. More than once. And with justification each time. Strategic, moral, existential. They do not revel in it. That would be easier to understand. No, they rationalize it. He advanced the projection. 2 blinding lights, blooming over cities. Mushrooms of ash. Death measured in megatons. These weapons were not born of desperation, Zilvar said. They were constructed in the pursuit of knowledge and perfected in peace. Not for use, merely in case. A crystalline historian rose, voice resonant with horror. They built extinction into protocol. Zilvar answered with only a glance at the screen, where rows of cold warheads sat silently in underground bunkers, still watched over by machines and oaths. They call it deterrence, a promise not to strike, backed by the ability to annihilate. No other species has invented a method of survival that demands the threat of mutual suicide. Silence returned, deeper than before. Let us move from war to culture, the professor continued. What species turns its darkest tendencies into entertainment? A new sequence began. Films, novels, simulations. Stories of serial killers, galactic invasions, apocalyptic collapses. Children played games where the objective was to eliminate others. Audiences cheered for antiheroes, for chaos, for revenge. They consume violence in fiction. They explore cruelty in art. They simulate extinction for amusement. A being from the peace-born Alarai collective blinked with visible confusion. But why? How does this benefit their society? Zilvar turned all 12 eyes toward the being. Because they know what they are, and they're trying to understand it. A new projection unfolded. Humans in protest. Humans rescuing animals. Humans sacrificing for strangers, crying over lost enemies. aiding their former oppressors. They are not only predators. That is the most dangerous truth of all. They possess empathy, but it is selective. Compassion that can be suspended. Morality that is fluid. They can love deeply and kill efficiently, and never confuse the two. Several scholars recoiled. Others leaned in, rapt. Most species either restrain aggression or embrace it. But humans? Zilvar's tone lowered. They compartmentalize it. Violence is not constant, is stored, controlled, released with purpose, often with ceremony. He played a short clip. Soldiers saluting before combat. Generals placing flowers on enemy graves. Children reciting oaths to protect while training to destroy. This paradox is the true anatomy of their supremacy. The predator with a conscience. The killer who mourns. The destroyer who rebuilds stronger. A soft moan echoed from an empath in the crowd. A telepathic species recoiling from something they had inadvertently touched in a nearby human mind. Their body curled in on itself, overwhelmed. They carry trauma as fuel, Zilvar said, glancing toward the empath. And they do not forget. They simply redirect. The room was very quiet now. No questions. No whispers. Only the human, still in the shadows, face unreadable. They did not spread through the stars because they were the strongest, the professor finished. They did it because they were willing to become what was needed, no matter the cost. One more image appeared, an old human proverb, etched into stone, floating midair. We did not cross the void because it was easy. We crossed it because it was there. Zilvar turned slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. They do not hunt for survival. They hunt for purpose, the silent witness. The crowd remained quiet long after the final image faded. No one stirred. No questions came. No rebuttals. Not even the hum of idle translator devices. Professor Zilvar hovered above the dais like a shadow carved from stillness. Then at last the human in the back row stood. She was not tall by galactic standards. She bore no visible weapons, no badge of office. Just simple black clothing, close-cropped hair, and eyes that didn't blink often enough for anyone's comfort. Zilvar inclined slightly toward her. "Would you like to offer a correction, Ambassador?" She said nothing for a moment. Her eyes swept the room. Over the dozens of species, the skeptical faces, the ones who now avoided her gaze. Then she stepped forward into the light. "I'm not here to correct you," she said evenly. "Only to clarify one thing." Her voice carried without amplification. Calm, measured. The voice of someone who had spoken through smoke, over screaming, in command when no orders were left. "You've called us predators," she continued. "You're right. But that word, it's incomplete." She reached the center of the hall, standing where Zilvar had lectured just moments ago. The professor shifted aside without objection. "We didn't choose to become what we are. Not at first. We were born into a world that didn't care if we lived. We had to fight cold, hunger, disease, each other." She gestured upward, where the stars rotated gently on the dome. "We didn't come here to conquer. We came here because we had to, because staying still meant death, because the only thing more terrifying than the unknown was surrendering to it." Murmurs stirred again, but not in mockery this time. Curiosity had returned. "You think we're monsters. We think that about ourselves sometimes too. But we don't hunt out of cruelty. We hunt to understand, to protect, to survive." She glanced at Zilvar. "You said we compartmentalize violence. You're right again. Because if we didn't, if we felt every cut, every sacrifice, every face we couldn't save, we'd go mad." A few alien delegates nodded, solemn. Others looked away. "You call us supreme predators. Maybe that's true, but you're missing the other side." She took a breath. "We're also the universe's most relentless protectors." Silence again. Even deeper now, but laced with a new tension. Not fear, but the awareness of something vast and hard to define. "Do you know how many worlds we've defended that weren't ours?" she asked. "How many times we've stood between weaker species and extinction? Not because it was profitable, but because someone had to." Images replaced the starfield above. Human soldiers evacuating alien civilians during planetary quakes. Humans distributing food to famine-struck colonies. humans forming living shields during evacuations under fire. We train for war not because we want it, she said, but because we know someone else always will. And when they come, when the monsters knock, we answer. Zilvar watched her carefully, silent now, all his eyes focused. We remember every atrocity, the human went on. Every genocide, every war. We carry that weight so the next generation doesn't have to. That's not cruelty. That's duty. She paused, let the words breathe. We are not your enemy. We don't want to dominate your worlds. We don't want to be feared. But if fear is what keeps you cautious, if it makes you think twice before underestimating us. She looked around the hall. Then good. No one spoke. And if one day something worse than us comes through the dark, something you can't reason with, something that doesn't hesitate. She stepped back toward the shadows. You'll hope we're the ones who find it first. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. One, a long-limbed strategist from the Algarai Union, murmured, "So you do believe you're the most dangerous species?" The woman paused at the edge of the light. "No," she said. "I believe we're the ones who don't quit." She turned to Zilvar. "Thank you, Professor. You explained us better than we ever could have. But next time," Zilvar tilted his head, "invite more humans. We've all got stories." And with that, she was gone, into the shadows, into silence. For a long time, the hall remained still. Then Zilvar spoke one last time. "You came seeking novelty," he said, addressing the room. "You found a mirror instead." He gestured once, and the recording crystal blinked out. Lecture concluded.